Legal system, you've had much contact with that?
Well, this would be a very important point I would make in terms of legal, as in, say, purchasing property or anything like that, dealing with solicitors. What happened to me was a friend of mine had purchased an apartment 4 years before me. I availed of his solicitor, whom he was able to recommend unreservedly. He had got that solicitor from friends of his who had previously. The same with the bank, with the English speaker. When we were buying a property, it was we were passing on each, which is something that I took for granted, but I know people who are looking to buy somewhere like Prague or Dubrovnik or something mightn't have those contacts. So I would urge anybody considering living over here or purchasing something to do their research, and in that way you'll find somebody that is reliable and trustworthy.
And what would you say to somebody who said, "Oh, well, you don't need to use a lawyer; it's just wasted money. The estate agent will do it for me, or I've got a friend who's recommended a friend who knows what this is all about."
I have read and seen so much in terms of people who have had problems with illegal planning, with dodgy dealings, that I would say a reputable lawyer is absolutely essential. Yes. Even if it's somebody who will tell you, you must do it this way. And that's something that has also changed. The black market, the black money, that in purchasing and selling,
really now,
there was kind of cash involved.
Yes.
All that went when the crash came, and there were scandals about the bribery, and people ended up in jail. And now there's a very strict regime, even in terms of, say, expats who might be renting apartments and not declaring the tax. It's now quite a serious issue, and I wouldn't recommend anybody take shortcuts.
So people ought to be reading our Guides.Global guides to buying property,
Absolutely.
renting out your property, and so on, because we cover all of that in some detail.
Very serious, and particularly if you did have legal dealings in a country where it's not your first language. Yeah. It's difficult enough dealing with the legal system in your home country. Just from stories I've heard, small level stories, it is doubly stressful. Yes. If you're dealing with the system where you're not conversant with the language and the legalese of that, and the bureaucracy of that legal system.
Yes. You've mentioned sports facilities, plentiful in this area.
Unbelievably good. Yes. Second to none, far superior to Ireland or the UK. Every small community will have its sports hall, will have its public swimming pool, will have soccer pitches. Yes. Even very small mountain communities. Yes. I'm thinking of small places outside Marbella where you're at a viewing point outside the town and you see this lovely white village, and then this multi-million euro development on the outskirts of the village. And where we played paddle, for example, when I started playing paddle, was on the public courts, €3 an hour. Yes. For 4 people to play. Yes. Widely available, and the same rate for the tennis courts and the soccer pitches and the basketball pitches. Unbelievably good facilities, particularly for people who have children that they're wondering, will they be well looked after?
And as far as general social facilities are concerned, really in this part of Spain, mainly eating and drinking, would you say?
Yes. Yes. Limited number of places where you would have music, and it's one of the issues that would be an issue in the tourist industry in Marbella, where they're very strict. If you live here and you have an apartment, you're quite grateful if you're living in town that they're reasonably strict, but they have become a lot more strict in terms of setting time limits, volume control on music, and in some ways it's almost, I would think, too restrictive. So if you want to go and have a night out with music or entertainment, you might need to go to Puerto Banús or Nueva Andalucía, where it's not as strict. But there is some, but you would need to, and I mean, they have quite a number of tourist offices who are wonderful for telling you all the entertainment that's available.
And of course there is classical music and opera and various other things as well. So
yes, and flamenco, they have an amphitheatre in one of the parks here, where during the summer they have flamenco shows.
Are you a religious man?
Yes, I'm Catholic.
And you find no problem practicing here?
No, well, partly to my shame, I go to an international mass.
Right.
because even though I have a reasonable relationship with God, I don't know how much it would benefit from expressing myself in pidgin Spanish. But at the moment, there's an international mass once a week in one of the local churches, and many of the expat community would go there. Occasionally, I go to the main parish church where everything is through Spanish, but of course, there's no difficulty.
If they had abandoned Latin, it would all be different.
Exactly.
And finally, living costs. How would you say the day-to-day living costs here compare to the costs back home?
Well, because I was living in Dublin, which is a capital city in Europe, Northern Europe, Dublin is expensive, far more expensive than living in rural Ireland. So Marbella would be not an awful lot different. It would depend very much on your lifestyle. For example, when I'm here on my own, I don't eat out in the evening very often unless I'm meeting friends. And buying and cooking and that, you can, if you go to the market, for example, it is much cheaper than you would buy in Dublin, I would say. If you're selective in what supermarket you buy fruit and meat and that in, you can save a lot of money. So, you know, you can have your pizza meal cheaper than in Ireland, or you can pay €200 a head for a meal in a fancy restaurant here. In general, if you are careful and you do your research, you can live very reasonably.
Final section, cultural differences. We've touched on them already. Your cultural baseline, as it were, is obviously Republic of Ireland. How different is the culture here? And in what are the main differences, do you think?
That's a very broad question. In general, I would say living in a tourist area like Marbella or anywhere on the Costa, the cultural differences don't present a major problem.
Because you're mixing with expats as well as Spanish people.
And because their system is such. So, for example, if you like your breakfast to be an English or Irish breakfast, that will be available to you anywhere on the Costa.
Yes.
So the fact that culturally fish is a huge part of their diet doesn't necessarily impinge on you, because you can avoid fish. I have a good relationship with fish. I go swimming in the sea and I live and let live. I don't eat it, and they don't eat me when I go swimming. But most people, because the fish around here is wonderful, would enjoy the sardines and the local fish. Culturally, I suppose one of the things that we do remark on, and possibly connected with the outdoor life, is Spanish people are a lot louder. For example, if I'm jogging and there are 4 people, Spanish people, coming towards me, 3 of them will be speaking at the same time. It appears, and you can hear them from 50 meters away. Now, we do have to be reminded occasionally, because I asked a girl in a restaurant one day why Spanish people are so free with their conversations, because when I'd been walking down, there was a gentleman on his mobile phone, and I could have joined in the conversation. He was so loud on one side of the street, and another gentleman on the other side who was equally willing to share his conversation with me, even though I had no interest in either. And she very gently pointed out to me, in her best English, that if this was a problem for me, there was a solution. And I had to admit, you're absolutely right. If that's part of their culture and you don't like it, nobody's forcing you to live here.
And of course, it is a lot about meeting people halfway, isn't it? That culture is different, but that's what makes Spain interesting.
Yes.
If it was exactly the same as back home, it would be a much diminished place.
And in some ways, it's very similar to, say, rural Ireland. For example, they will converse at the till in the shop. They won't in Dublin. They will understand there's a queue, people are in a hurry, and they want to get through. In here, almost every interchange between Spanish people in a shop will take twice the length of time you imagine that it should. So you just breathe deeply and you say, this is part of the relaxed. They don't see any reason why one should rush this process, and they are shooting the breeze and having a little chat. So calm down. That's part of the appeal of being
here. They may well be right.
Well, this is my point.
A better way of life.
Take a few moments to think and not to feel, I got to get through that. Why is there such a rush? In Dublin, it's a pace of life that is similar to Paris or London or whatever. why be at that pace of life when you're
Sure.
living here so relaxed? So from that point of view, I feel there are cultural benefits in terms of you have a different pace of life here. So relax and enjoy it. There isn't a rush.
Gerry, two final thoughts. What's the best thing about living in Spain?
Well, I think like most people, they would say the climate.
Yes, that's been the almost universal response.
Yes. But allied to that, many of my friends would say, is that the reason why Spanish people appear so positive? Lots of, we're talking about noisy chatter. To see a Spanish family or group of friends out celebrating is a joy to behold. There is a joie de vivre in general. Even the hard-working people in the tourist industry have a smile on their face. Yes. Maybe that is linked to their vitamin enriched environment from the sun, yes, which they have all year round. So without question, it affects, because I would have suffered the opposite in Ireland, the seasonal affective disorder to a minor extent, that bad weather in winter and the short days I would have found quite depressing, irrespective of whether I was working or at rest. Going out to play a game of tennis wearing a woolly cap and gloves is not the ideal way of playing sport. In the month of January here, you're in t-shirt and shorts and you have sunglasses.
Swimming in a wetsuit.
Yeah. So that is a huge plus.
The worst thing?
I suppose, if I were to be honest, there are certain things that are available in supermarkets in Ireland, the Irish sausage, the black and white pudding, that I do hanker after occasionally. You notice when you go back to the supermarkets in Ireland, you're assaulted by hot temptation and all. It's such an enriched, lavish place. The supermarkets here are they're very, you have your fish counter, but it's all cold, and it's there isn't the same attempt to get you to indulge in ready-made meals and everything. So there's some aspects of the food in the supermarkets that I'd hanker after. Very minor disadvantage compared to the pluses there are in abundance.
Gerry, thank you for a very interesting interview. I think we've allowed it to run on about 3 times the length that I'd initially planned, but all very, very interesting.
Well, thank you, and I hope I haven't said the wrong thing about anybody or said anything terribly negative about my life here in Marbella.
If you'd like to find out more, do read our guide about retiring to Spain. Also, perhaps look at the Guides.Global guides to tax and living in Spain, and the host of other Guides.Global guides on our website. If you've liked this video, like it. If you would like to follow us, follow us. And whether you do that or not, we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you and goodbye.